when we started writing this book on Silicon Valley, we had no idea we would eventually write a 600-page book. The idea actually came to my friend Arun Rao, who works in the financial world. And when he asked me, why don't we write a book on Silicon Valley, my first reaction was, this is a stupid idea, because people in Silicon Valley don't care about the past, they only care about the future. Then I started thinking about it, and I realized there was a very good reason to write the book, to answer the same question that you have, the question that everybody has. Why did it happen there? I realized that it was really difficult to answer this simple question. If you go back in time to the beginning of Silicon Valley didn't have any advantage. It had all the disadvantages. It didn't have money, it didn't have brains, it didn't have the great universities, it didn't have the great scientists. All of these were in Europe and on the East Coast. The big electronic companies were on the East Coast or in Europe. Everything that you need to create a technology hub was not here. So it was actually a very interesting project, and it took a long time to write the history because most books don't really spend a lot of time on the details. They just talk about the famous people. As we were writing, also became very interesting to demystify. There are myths about Silicon Valley. For example, my favorite, the weather. Silicon Valley has good weather. You think that's enough to explain what happened here? Of course not. I was born in Italy that has great weather, and unfortunately we don't have anything comparable to Silicon Valley. Stanford University. Silicon Valley happened because of Stanford University. Well, it's almost the opposite. At the very beginning, when Silicon Valley was born, Stanford University was not one of the major universities. It became later. So it was really interesting to do the history and to realize that things are not so obvious. Nothing is obvious about Silicon Valley. So what is the secret of Silicon Valley? Well, it's probably a combination of many secrets, and it's not what people think. When people think Silicon Valley these days, they think invention. Silicon Valley invents. Well, let me tell you what Silicon Valley did not invent. Silicon Valley did not invent the transistor, did not invent the computer, did not invent robots, did not invent the internet, did not invent integrated circuits, did not invent the World Wide Web, did not invent the smartphone, the search engine, social networking. I could continue. Everything that you associate with Silicon Valley, except the microprocessor, was not invented here actually. So what is this myth about innovation? Well, you really have to define innovation. Silicon Valley does not specialize in inventing something new. What it does, it takes an invention and almost hijacks it. It uses the new technology to do something that others are not doing. That's what really Silicon Valley specializes in. It takes a technology, it reshapes it, reinvents it, and then it makes it go viral all over the world. I like to think of it as destabilizing society. You know, technology is usually invented to improve society, and Silicon Valley uses new technology to destabilize society. And, you know, there's this term, Schumpeter introduced this term called creative destruction, and I think Silicon Valley is about destructive creativity. Of course, destructive not as in violence, as in, you know, the way society works. But okay, so that's the big thing. That's the big thing that is difficult to explain in a few words, what Silicon Valley does with technology. And then there are simpler things. For example, meritocracy. Most of the Western world, most of the world in general, has a structure of society that tends to reward the children, the friends, the family. And Silicon Valley is a meritocracy. You can be absolutely nobody from a poor village in India or from a poor family in Italy. And in Silicon Valley, if you're good, you're good. You know, people don't really care what your background is. Another obvious secret is immigration. I was born in another country. I think almost all of my friends were born in another country or another state. Very few of the protagonists of Silicon Valley were born in the Bay Area. So one of the secrets is to create a place where people want to come, you know, especially young, educated people from all over the world. They want to come here. Then there's definitely a skill in transferring invention from university to the industry, which is something every country talks about, but it's not so simple to do, and Silicon Valley obviously does very well. Another thing that we become to appreciate now that Silicon Valley is so big and so powerful is how much Silicon Valley uses the rest of the world. Where are Apple's smartphones made? Not here. Where are many of Oracle's software engineers? Not here. Many of them are in Asia. Many of them are far away from here. Silicon Valley is very good at using the entire world as a resource, not as competition, as a resource. Then of course there's luck, just luck. I mean, one of the very first labs was built by William Shockley, because Shockley was one of the inventors of the transistor at Bell Labs on the East Coast. And he moved to Palo Alto because his mom lived here. So the luck always is important. And the other thing that I try to explain in the book, that technology does not exist in a vacuum. You have to look at the society. The society of the Bay Area, not specifically here, we are right in the middle of Google campus and not far from Facebook, but the Bay Area as a whole has a tradition of counterculture, as a tradition of people who think differently, people who fight the system, people who oppose big corporations, people who oppose big government. That tradition has something to do with the spirit of Silicon Valley, with the spirit of going against the accepted dogmas. So it is very much part of the spirit of Silicon Valley. Now, towards the end of the book, I speak about trends, and so people always ask me, especially when I am outside Silicon Valley, people ask me, so what's the next big thing? What's coming next? And that's a very difficult answer. That's a very difficult question to answer. And so we usually, people who really live here in Silicon Valley, we try not to answer that question because it's always wrong. Whenever we try to predict the future, we are wrong. Even just within 2-3 years, so many things happen that completely changed what we thought. But there's something that I can tell you, that what is happening now, and then you can decide what the future is going to be like. One thing that has happened over the last few years is that I think actually Marx and Lenin would be happy. Silicon Valley unleashed the power of the masses. You know, what we call the sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber, Lyft. These are cases where technology is used so that the masses can sell directly assets that they have. And that crowdfunding, there are startups that are funded by the crowd. So that's a totally new world where the traditional owners of power are outpowered by the masses. Then right now there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence. I grew up with artificial intelligence when it was first popular, then it lost popularity. I'm happy it's coming back. I think it's a little overhyped. On the other hand, biotech, synthetic biology, That's people don't spend enough time talking about it. Both artificial intelligence and genetics were born approximately the same time, in the 50s. And I think actually biotech has made more progress. We have cloned animals. Progress in biotech has been incredible. And then I tell my friends, we always miss the revolution. When a revolution is happening, we never realize it. 2 years later, everybody's talking about it. I remember 91, how many people were talking about the World Wide Web. We started talking in 1993, 94. So I was thinking, I tried to think, what is the revolution is happening right now around me and people are not talking about? And it could be sensors. Sensors have become very cheap, they're ubiquitous, they're very intelligent. You can put sensors into just about everything. And so this is changing things. This is making everything intelligent. Not just the machine, but objects. Any object can become intelligent if you put a sensor in it. I think the big difference about today's Silicon Valley is that everybody wants to be here now. There's so many people coming from all over the world, startups founded on the East Coast, in Europe, in Asia, and they move their offices here. And there's so much money. There's an incredible number of investment coming from all over the world. So I think personally, I'm not too worried about the future of Silicon Valley. Things will happen just because now Silicon Valley is the center of the world. I'm more worried about the spirit. So think about the spirit. When I came here in the 80s, Silicon Valley was about small, crazy companies. The biggest companies weren't among the biggest in the world. And now Silicon Valley has Apple, which is the biggest company, #1 in the world. It has Google and Facebook that are #1 in their field. Oracle is #1 in ERP in its field. Intel is #1 in semiconductors. So Silicon Valley is #1 companies, and that's something completely different. I was reading in The Economist, the big corporation Silicon Valley has $485 billion in cash. So imagine what they can buy with this cash. So I think I'm more concerned about the change that Silicon Valley has become a corporate place, and maybe some of the companies that now are very hyped might very soon get in trouble. You know, right now, as I speak, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Yahoo have reported that they have some trouble. So some of these Silicon Valley has been going through these cycles, boom and bust, for many years. Every time there is a bust, my friends in Europe and on the East Coast tell me Silicon Valley is finished. And sure enough, Silicon Valley restarts, and it starts bigger and bigger. Now, the Chinese government has an interesting plan to create China's Silicon Valleys. I say plural, more than one, because I hear about it in different places. And these plans usually encompass build an environmentally friendly and smart city, create an high-tech ecosystem of innovation, and foster a cycle from innovation to incubation to commercialization to application. Now, I like what China is doing. Obviously, it's being very successful because very few countries have created so many success stories in such a short time. My warning is that actually Silicon Valley was much humbler. It never did what China is doing now. Silicon Valley is much worse as a society, as a place to live. We have a poor infrastructure. Public transportation is lacking. It's almost the public transportation of a third world country. If you don't have a car, you have to use a bicycle. We don't have the fast trains that China has. We don't have the subways that China has. We have no skyscrapers in Silicon Valley. There's the major museum. Here's the Computer History Museum. So honestly, Silicon Valley is a relatively quiet and ugly place to live. China has done a much better job in creating places, interesting places to live, except for pollution, of course. So China is doing more than Silicon Valley did. Silicon Valley did not become what it is because of investment in infrastructure. I don't even know where this city is. Right now I'm in Sunnyvale, in the middle of Silicon Valley. Where is the border of Sunnyvale? Where is the center of Sunnyvale? So China is actually creating better cities in this sense. So what is China missing? That's a long story, of course. But the first thing that you notice if you go to China's Silicon Valley, I've been there in September, 99% are Chinese people. Very intelligent, hardworking, but it's Chinese. Here, around me, if you could see the people who are walking and biking, and I hear somebody speaking, I don't know, Hebrew maybe, Russian, very few of the people here are from California. There's an incredible number of people from all over the world. So that's one thing China is missing. You know, Silicon Valley, California, United States in general is very good at attracting people, especially bright, young, educated people from all over the world. And then, of course, the political system. You cannot talk about the society without talking about politics. Is China creating a place where a German, a British person, an Indian want to live for the rest of their life? And that is not just the weather, it is the whole system. Universities here, generally in the West, universities are very good at teaching engineering, science, but also liberal arts. You know, we produce thousands and thousands of great artists and musicians and writers. China is incredibly good students. I've been lecturing at universities. I was impressed, and even here, Stanford, probably the Chinese students are the best that Stanford has. So it's not about the quality of the students. Students are great. It's how university teaches things. And one thing that we teach here is to be disruptive. You know, to come up with a great idea, but not only it's a great idea that improves a little bit, it's a new photocopier. It's a new kind of voice technology. Come up with a technology that is disruptive, that will change society. So that are students given the motivation and then the power to disrupt the political and economic system. Personally, I think art, music, literature, very important because they create exactly this disruptive mindset, the mindset that you have to do something different. There's no artist who just wants to copy another artist. Every artist is convinced I am the greatest genius in the world. Most artists are not great geniuses, but all of them want to do something different. And that's very much part of it. In fact, I organized the last festival, Life, Art, Science, Technology Festival, which is held in Silicon Valley. And it's about, sure, it's about technology. It's about high-tech art, digital art. But it's a way, it tells you that this, if you want to know more, lastfestival.com, the perception here is that technology is not something ugly, powerful, dangerous, it's the government. Technology is fun, you know, it's just like art. It's something that you have to play with. And then one thing that China probably doesn't have as much as California is venture capitalists, regular people who want to invest in startups, in new ideas. And the law is very important, and this my co-author Arun Rao knows more about this, but the law in California was particularly friendly to high technology. You don't go to jail if you leave a company, join another company that is working in the same kind of technology. So exchanging information was not so difficult. You have to think, what is disruptive in China now? And honestly, if I ask people outside China, who do you think has been the most disruptive person in China in the last 30 years? Probably the answer is Deng Xiaoping. It's a politician, actually. He was really disruptive. And then today the government probably is the most disruptive force. Even we Westerners, pro-democracy, pro-Tibet, pro-Taiwan, must recognize that the Chinese government is smarter than our own democratically elected governments, and I'm not too happy when I say this. But of course, this has to transition to the young generations. It's ordinary people who have to have this attitude, and they have to be encouraged in doing this. And at the same time, I mean, politics is there. You cannot have a discussion about society without politics. And Silicon Valley was also lucky that it was part of California, United States, Western world, at the time of the Cold War. We cannot omit this part. The history of Silicon Valley begins with the war, World War II. Computers were invented in World War II. A lot of the inventions we have today, the internet to start with, come because of the Cold War. It was the Western world, capitalist world, fighting against the communist world. That was important because our allies were Britain, Germany, Japan, not the Soviet Union, and we had a big advantage in exchanging technology with these people. So today, many inventions came from Western Europe and Japan, and many scientists came from all over the world. It was a big advantage. So today China has to decide who are China's friends. Russia, which I think is basically a country run by gangsters, a country that has not invented anything in the last 20 years, or the United States, a country that's basically run by technology. Are you sure that you want to be friend with Russia and not with Japan? You want to be friend with Kazakhstan instead of Taiwan? You want to be friend with North Korea instead of South Korea? So these are decisions that I think have a huge impact on many other things. China can be, I think China is very welcome if it wants to be integrated with the world of innovation and science, with this world is behind me. Same with the art and literature. See, if you think of it, China is a big opportunity because China and Silicon Valley have things in common. Silicon Valley started from nothing, and China, after the Cultural Revolution, restarted from nothing. Silicon Valley was a very unlikely place, while China in the late 80s was a very unlikely place. I visited China when it was a very poor country. And China, if there is one country in the world where the system is a meritocracy, that's probably China. So, and traditionally it goes back to Confucius, right? So China has a big opportunity to be part of this world of innovation. At the same time, I wouldn't really want China to copy too much from Silicon Valley. China has thousands of years of history of great philosophers and great writers. I certainly don't want China to become like Silicon Valley that has very, very little in terms of history and science. So my word of advice to these countries that want to copy Silicon Valley is look at Japan. Japan doesn't have a Silicon Valley. Japan failed to create something similar to Silicon Valley, but so what? Japan has been very successful. They have invented the transistor radio, the pocket calculator, the color photocopiers, the first portable music players, the first commercial digital synthesizer, compact disc, DVD, camcorder, hybrid car, flash memory. All these things came out of Japan. So it doesn't have to be Silicon Valley. You can adapt the high-tech world to your own reality. And Japan has won 22 Nobel Prizes. That is very impressive. Almost all of them after World War II. China has won one in literature, Mo Yan. Japan accounts for 21% of all patents awarded worldwide. There are more than 2,000 startups in Tehran Valley in Seoul, South Korea. Taiwan's companies produce 80% of all personal digital assistant devices, 70% of all notebooks, and 60% of all flat panel monitors. So there are success stories outside Silicon Valley. You don't have to be exactly like Silicon Valley. You have to pick what is good about this place and then match it to your civilization. So the question is often how is Silicon Valley so good at commercializing technology, as turning technology into products? And I actually don't completely agree. I don't think Silicon Valley is so good at this. It's a side effect. The success of our products is a side effect of the way Silicon Valley works. Well, first of all, if you go back in history, the first major high-tech company, Fairchild, was selling integrated circuits to the military and to NASA, so it didn't have to do much. And but then if you start thinking of Google, Facebook, they invented something, they built something because they wanted to use it. The motivation for many startups is, I want something that doesn't exist, so I'll make it. And sometimes there's another motivation, that's the motivation to change the world, to create something that is good for the world. And that comes from, you know, as I said, the idealism that has been around the Bay Area. But focus on the fact that many startups, I think there are 6,000 startups right now in the Bay Area. Many of these were started by young people who simply wanted something that doesn't exist, so I'll make it. Well, that creates an interesting Darwinian system. They are making something that probably thousands, if not millions, of other people want and doesn't exist. So to me, it's a Darwinian system. You know, Darwin says mutation and variation create the opportunity for new species, and then the environment selects the good one. And I think something similar happens in Silicon Valley, where you have 6,000 startups creating 6,000 products, and the world will choose which ones will go viral. So I'm not sure that Silicon Valley is really that good at commercializing products. Silicon Valley is good at creating so much variation in products that some of them will be accepted by the rest of the world, and it's the world that will do the publicity, the marketing, and so forth. It sounds easy, but that's precisely what Western Europe failed to implement. Western Europe doesn't have something like Silicon Valley. So Guan is a strategic plan to create an environmentally friendly city, to emphasize innovation, to create an industrial cluster, to attract resources, and people first. It is very difficult for me to comment on other people's strategies because I don't know enough of their territories. Of course, you have to define innovation. As I said, actually Silicon Valley invents very little, but it's very good at using technology in different ways. You have to define people first. I mean, here people are first. The way you own a company, every employee owns a little bit of the company. They reward you based on your merits. And of course, it's a free society where individuals can express themselves. If you use people just to make copies, obviously you're not doing what Silicon Valley is doing. But I send my best wishes to Guan, a model of innovation in the Beijing region, and I certainly wish that it will become a competitor of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley likes competitors. That's what makes us better if we have to compete with others. I want to thank CFLD. Let's see if I pronounce it correctly in Chinese. Hua Xia Xing Fu, and the China Newsweek for organizing this 2015 China Innovation Summit. I'm looking forward to visit Guan and the next China Innovation Summit. And I want to thank Dawei for setting up this interview and providing the topics of discussion. And thank you, Agnes, for her dedication to make this happen.